Sometimes in life, things aren't quite what they appear to be. Take, for example, the Changan NEVO E07. At first glance, it just looks like a strangely shaped SUV. Then you touch a button and you realize it's something much more special than that.
Welcome to Wheels Boy, where we cover the newest, coolest, and wildest vehicles from the Chinese car market. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell.
As an electric pickup truck with a strange shape, the Changan NEVO E07 has earned the name Chinese Cybertruck here in China. But honestly, I think that's downplaying its strangeness quite a bit. The exterior styling honestly doesn't share that much with the Cybertruck. The Cybertruck has a very brutalist straight line design, whereas this is a much rounder, softer shape and as a result, much more aerodynamic. The Cybertruck has a coefficient to drag of 0.34, whereas this thing is 0.237. The dimensions of the E07 are slightly longer than a Hyundai Santa Cruz, but considerably shorter than something like a Ford Ranger Super Crew. That's a four-door Ford Ranger. When I say shorter, I mean like 0.3 meters or a whole foot shorter than that vehicle. As such, it's not like a big old brugga-dugga tough man truck. It's more of a big enough to be useful, but not big enough to blot out the sun truck. That applies to the potential off-road prowess of this vehicle as well. Numbers like approach and departure angle and maximum ground clearance are very similar to a Honda CR-V, not a larger pickup truck. The maximum ground clearance, for example, is 207 millimeters or 8.1 inches, and that's only if you have the optional air suspension jacked up to its highest level. Those numbers are obviously better than something like a sedan, but they're not going to win you a whole lot of respect over at the local mud hole.
If you ever need to wade through some mud or water, the E07 has a maximum wading depth of 600 millimeters, or about 24 inches. Again, not bad, but not as impressive as the 800 millimeters, or 31.5 inches of a Ford Ranger.
Wading through hip-deep water doesn't happen every day, but you know what does? Accidents. So stay protected with today's sponsor, the 70mi A510 Dashcam. The A510 is a genuine all-rounder with smart functions you wouldn't expect from a dashcam, like super sensing ADAS, which includes lane departure warnings, forward collision warnings, and even leading vehicle departure alerts.
Vehicle ahead motion detected.
In addition to these smart functions, the A510 also has built-in GPS, and it records trip time, speed, and coordinates, which is invaluable for filing police reports and insurance claims in the event of an accident. The kit is easy to install on any vehicle, and when combined with the rear camera, it can provide nearly 360-degree coverage dual recording. Speaking of pairing, you can easily pair it with your phone using Bluetooth. The footage is crystal clear, both day and night, thanks to the 3K Sony Starvis 2 HDR sensor, allowing you to capture important info, like license plate numbers. Want to review your footage? Simply use the hardware buttons on the device or do it via the mobile app. You can even access it remotely by adding a SIM card to the dashcam itself. Remote access also works great with the Smart Parking Guardian mode, a 24-hour parking surveillance system that offers collision detection when stationary. So what are you waiting for? Get your 70mi A510 dashcam by clicking on the link in the video description below. This car will be available as an extended range electric vehicle or a pure EV, but right now we only have info about the pure electric version, and honestly, that's pretty scant. For example, we do not know the official number for battery capacity or range, though I'm hearing things like 90 kilowatt hours and a range of 650 to 700 kilometers, depending on whether you get the single or dual motor powertrain. What we do know for sure is that it's going to ride on an 800 volt charging architecture with a max charging speed of 230 kilowatts, or max charging power rather, and a max charging speed of, say, 350 kilometers in 15 minutes, according to Changan at least. We also do not know exactly the price range, even a pre-sale price. So we know that it's going to be around 300,000 RMB, or about 42,000 USD. Figure the price could range from about high 30,000s to high 40,000s. Okay, let's finally talk about what makes this thing so unique, and that is this rear end. If I touch this button here one time, it will lower the glass and open over this overhead glass about halfway, allowing me to reach inside and grab something. Very convenient. If I were to touch it again, they would close. If I am to long press again, it will also all close. But once you've opened it, you can control it via this panel over here. You can control each of the different parts back here separately. There's a button here for closing it completely. There's a button here that I'm going to hit for opening the overhead glass completely. And then there's, of course, a button here for lowering the tailgate. Let's talk a little bit about the numbers here. This thing is 0.94 meters deep, so almost a meter, or a little over 3 feet deep. It's also 1.2 meters wide, so about the same size as kind of a short bed pickup truck over in the States. Maybe not quite that long. For comparison, a Ford Raptor, or Ford Ranger rather, it has a 5-foot bed, or a 1.5 meter bed. So definitely not as long as that, but still enough to fit plenty of things. If you lift up this tray, you also have some additional storage space underneath. Maximum payload, 300 kilograms. That's not very impressive, let's be honest. It's actually less than half of a Hyundai Santa Cruz. That's 300 kilograms, or around 660 pounds. You're not going to be hauling boulders in this thing, but it's definitely enough to help a buddy move. But wait, there's more. This thing has a glass partition, which you can raise or lower, but you can actually lower or raise the entire partition itself. It also has an absolutely massive frunk. So one thing you'll realize looking at this car is that you can grab things from the back pretty easily, but if you want to grab something from the side, not really going to happen. Then again, with full-size pickup trucks these days, it's not exactly easy to grab stuff from the side anyways, because they're so tall. While I'm over here, you'll notice there's also a 220 volt outlet, as well as a 12 volt. So what happens if this thing breaks? Well, then you have a case of permanent pickup truck. Well, depending on whether it's open or closed when it breaks. If it's closed, then you have a case of permanent SUV. What happens if it breaks halfway closed? Well, that's called bad luck. Now that you know what the E07 is, let's talk about why it exists in the first place. And it has to do with some very specific restrictions here in China that apply only to pickup trucks. First of all, pickup trucks, as freight vehicles, must be scrapped after just 15 years on the road. Second of all, they have limited accessibility to the city centers of most Chinese, major cities. As a result, the resale value of trucks is absolutely nil, and so they've never taken off as passenger vehicles here in the Chinese market. This thing is categorized as an SUV, even though it has what is effectively a pickup truck bed. So it resolves these problems. The interior of the E07 is unlike any pickup truck you've ever seen. First of all, there's the overall styling, which honestly rides that thin line between minimalism and barren. I would actually say it moves more towards the barren end of the spectrum. You've got huge swaths of what is soft touch material all over the car, but just doesn't really give you anything interesting to look at. The style, though, is very open and airy. I have tons of space around me, particularly down here between the seats in the center console, where I could fit quite a bit of stuff, obviously. Front of the center console here, you have a scent system. Very nice. Back of that, you've got a wireless charging pad and another absolutely massive storage area down here. This is a relatively new design language to pickup trucks, but what's really interesting is the tech in here. First of all, you've got this 15-inch center screen, which can change angles at the touch of a button, or in this case, the slide of a slider all the way over to face the passenger. You can also move it with your hands, like so, or you can use voice commands to move it. That's not the only screen in this car, though. We'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to point out the fact that this thing has not one, but 2 zero-gravity seats. The passenger seat and the driver's seat both have zero-gravity mode. I promised you a second screen, and now I'm going to deliver. You can enjoy this large passenger screen from the comfort of your zero-gravity passenger seat, like so. The E07 has a frankly massive 3.12 meter wheelbase. Now, some of that obviously goes to the base for the bed, but you do still get a good amount of leg room back here, and headroom, not so good. I don't know why it is that so many models from Changan and their sub-brands like Changan really don't have great headspace. I'm thinking of the Changan, or rather the Deepal SL03 sedan. You get a fold-down center armrest, which I have to pull this cord in order to fold down, and then you also get one USB charging port. Just one. Come on, it should be two. Well, we didn't get the opportunity to drive the E07 on public roads today because we're in a closed testing site. We are in a closed testing site, which means we get to drive it on some very interesting locations. Right now we're on a course that is meant to mimic various driving situations. In this case, we're on a very, very bumpy road, so we're able to experience this car's optional, not standard, optional air suspension with adjustable stiffness and height and CDC. And I have to say, this thing is riding quite well over these various obstacles, these kind of repeated bumps and cracks in the road, these potholes and everything. It is actually performing quite well, especially considering I'm used to driving body-on-frame pickup trucks back in the US. This is a completely different world. So while you may not have the performance in terms of being able to put 1,000 pounds or 500 kilos into the bed, this thing definitely drives and rides much more comfortably than a more traditional pickup truck. Having now driven this car up to around 100 kilometers per hour, I'm actually surprised to learn that the NVH is nowhere near as bad as I expected it to be, considering you have that fold-down separator between the bed and the cabin. I'm actually quite impressed. They kept comparing it to the NVH levels of a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, and I wouldn't quite go that far, but it is impressive considering the strange layout of this vehicle.
Thanks to an available dual-motor powertrain with 440 kilowatts or nearly 600 horsepower, the E07 is also faster than your average pickup truck, able to hurdle itself to 100 kilometers per hour in just 4 seconds. For those more practically minded buyers, there's also the single rear motor model with 252 kilowatts or a little over 300 horsepower.
When I first saw the E07, it struck me as a solution in search of a problem. Sure, it was a great workaround for a set of restrictions, but those restrictions really only applied to here in the Chinese market. In other markets, like the United States, I think your average truck buyer would see it as an overcomplicated solution to a problem they simply don't have. However, having driven it and experienced it, I do think there are markets where something like this, comfortable riding, certainly capable enough SUV truck thing with a very secure bed, might be a very appealing proposition.